Welcome to Truth Be Told, the podcast about being genuine and living your most authentic life. Today, I am excited about my guest. She is an award-winning poet and an activist about her health. So she's a jack of all trade. And I've known this guest for years. I can tell you that she is the real deal. Listeners, it is my pleasure to have on this episode, Medgine Mathurin. Medgine, welcome to Truth Be Told.
Thanks, Pierre. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm really excited about our conversation.
We actually go back to poetry back in like the university. Like I've seen you do it when there was the one Breath in Poetry in Edmonton started as a small initiative, and you actually performed as when it was like open mic nights.
That's right. Yeah, so a little bit about myself. As you mentioned, I'm a writer, spoken word poet. I'm also a patient advocate. And my journey has been pretty long. And as you mentioned, like we met, we went to school together, which is exciting to kind of see both of our journeys career-wise and everything else. And so back, I believe it was around 2010-ish was when Breath in Poetry Collective was birthed. I may be wrong around the year, but it was around that time frame where it was at Rouge Lounge on Jasper Ave where we would have regular open mic nights. And this was like the early stages of the spoken word poetry scene in Edmonton. And that was kind of the first place really that I shared my poetry. It was even around the time that I never thought I'd be writing poetry in the first place. I've always enjoyed the art form and admired other poets, but the idea that I could write was not something that I ever considered.
Yeah.
And so because for me it all started around the time of the earthquake, and which is why I remember the year, because it was in 2010 when Haiti had its huge earthquake. And I remember during that time being at a loss for words, really. I was just overwhelmed. I just had a lot of emotions that I really didn't know what it was like exactly, because it was just everything. It was shock, looking on CNN and watching a lot of just footage of what Haiti looked like, and remembering my childhood, because I grew up in Haiti. I remember visiting Le Palais National, which is the national palace, and I remember looking on CNN where the roof of the National Palace like collapsed on itself, and it was just
Oh my God.
it was just a lot of emotions, and a lot of people in my community at the time, they knew that I was Haitian, and I realized that especially during that time that I was the only Haitian they knew personally. And so there was a lot of people that reached out to me, just to see if I was okay, but also seeing if my family was affected, trying to find a way to support in any way they can. And I remember just feeling overwhelmed by that, and also not really knowing the answers, because I didn't know what my where my like I didn't know if my dad was okay, because he was he was there. And so in all of the mixture of all these emotions, I just remember not really knowing what to do with them. And so it eventually landed on paper,
Wow.
where I just tried to write down how I felt, and that became my first piece. So
Wow.
that's how and so for me, that was like the trajectory of realizing that, like, poetry in particular has a way of being able to help you process a lot of complicated thoughts and emotions. But not only that, is that it also gives you the ability to reclaim some level of power over a situation. Because for me, what happened was, I was feeling over time, I was feeling really upset by what the media portrayed Haiti as.
Mhm.
And I was getting frustrated by by all of it. And so the poem ended up becoming more of me processing the earthquake and the loss of it all, but also, re-emphasizing to people to look again. That's why the poem is called Gadepiyim, which means look at my country, but it's also called Look Again. And that's a way it was for me to to allow people into what I see my country as, in contrast of what the media was describing it as.
Wow. So almost like a healing, process for you, because you have so much pride in Haiti being your home,
Hmm.
and also people, you want to have people look at Haiti and say, no, like, this is a country that is rich in culture, rich in resources. You need to look at it that way. This is the real Haiti that you need to see.
Exactly. And it's also about reclaiming just the strength and the power of people, of the Haitian people, because it was just, even if it was the reality was that, there was a lot of people that obviously died, that were in very dire circumstances. um but I wanted to also remind the people of the strength of Haitian people and what they've overcome, um, and to not forget that in the midst of what they're looking at, you know? And so that's what the poem was about. And it became a journey of just I'm realizing that, like, that's a common thread, I guess, in my own journey, my own creative journey, both in advocacy and also in the types of poems that I end up writing. And it's always about reclaiming some level of power and going back to those moments where maybe my voice was silenced, and then giving words to that. And I and yeah, and in my own personal health journey, it was like that, because it's even, just for context, like I have lupus, which is a chronic health condition. It's a autoimmune disease that affects a lot of women of color, actually, between the age of 25 to 40 typically. And it's basically when your immune system starts um, your immune system becomes destabilized, and so what ends up happening is that it affects a lot of different organs. And it's known as the disease with 1,000 faces. And the reason why they say that is because everyone who has lupus has a completely different story. There's no linear description of,
Exactly.
even if my symptoms started as joint pain, somebody else, their symptoms might have started with renal failure, or seizures. And so it's a very complicated um, autoimmune condition that often gives way to others. And so for me, when in my own journey, I've, you know, it's been a 11-year journey where I had to learn how to stand up for myself, how to find words to explain how my body is feeling, and even finding words to explain what I need as far as support from people around me. And so um so yeah, so I feel like my whole life has been a journey of finding words for those moments and then giving voice to that,
Mhm.
and hopefully helping others borrow from the words that I find, if
Yeah,
that makes sense.
watching how you've told your story on your platform, you you actually just own your story, and you actually show that you are you're not falling a victim to your the situation, but rather you control it.
Mm.
And I admire what you've done. Like you've yeah, like just on your own, you said you raised what, like was it $1,000 for, was it the Lupus walk in Calgary?
That's right. Yeah. So a few years ago, this was like my first attempt in trying to fundraise more money for the Lupus Society of Alberta.
Yeah.
Um, and um, and I wanted to do that just because first of all, I wanted for more people to be aware of what lupus was, but also, recognizing that not a lot of the fact that not a lot of people know about it also means that there's less resources that are available for people living with lupus. And
Right.
so it was a 2-for-1 where I was like, you know what, let me try and see if I can rally others to come alongside me in raising money. And so yeah, so I raised, I believe it was a little over $1,100, I think, at the end. The goal was 1,000, and I was so grateful that others just continued to donate over that. And I definitely want to try and do that again, or maybe combine a little bit more of my poetry and my art to kind of rally more funding for for the Lupus Society of Alberta or organizations like that, because
Mhm.
I value what they do, because
Mhm.
it makes a difference when you actually connect with others who have the same lived experience, um because it can be very, very isolating to
Yes.
live with a health condition that no one around you has, because as much as you may, or others, like as much as others might be able to empathize
Mhm.
and try to support,
Mm.
when you're trying to explain to them how you feel, there will always be a disconnect,
Mhm.
because they don't have that experience in their bodies. But it hits different when I talk to someone with lupus and say, I've been living with a lot of fatigue the past week, and they know exactly what that means, versus someone who may not have that experience. You know what I mean? And so to be able to have resources to given to organizations to help support others who are navigating those things is like, it's so crucial, especially to the quality of life of a lot of us, because oftentimes when you do have a chronic illness like that, it can put you out of work, and it could also just create a lot of inconsistencies in your ability to even show up for work and the nature of your work.
I I have epilepsy. Was diagnosed with that condition 9 years ago. So
Mm,
I can obviously I don't have no like I don't have the same the
mhm,
symptoms or side effects that
right.
lupus has, but You're absolutely right. Like all the things that and that everyone goes through different stories, and you're right. It even impacts like your well-being or even your work.
Yeah, it's a different kind of lonely, I think, where it's almost like you're lonely within yourself too. Like it's not just like, the experience, but it's just like, especially, when your life begins to change because of your health condition, where you realize that, like, you used to be able to work and to work, to do the task and to do it easily and to do it well. And then when you slowly realize that it's just harder to do, it's so hard, because now you have to kind of reassess how you view yourself, and it could be very disorienting, and it's really hard to explain to people around you, because you never, especially at the beginning, you've never dealt with something like that, and so
Mhm.
it's like you're processing this weird grief,
Yeah,
like, by yourself,
yeah,
unless you know someone around that has had that same health condition. They might be able to kind of walk you through
right.
what their experiences was.
Yeah, that the you're mentioning the weird grief. Like, what did you actually mean by
By grief.
like weird grief? Like what? Because
Yeah. So
by obviously it's like by grief I know that certain people might be thinking a loss in their life.
yeah, yeah. So for me, when I'm talking about grief, it was, you know, my life before lupus
Mhm,
was always go, go, go.
mhm,
I like doing a lot of things. I
mhm,
was involved at my church. And I would always have some kind of social involvement in the community, doing my poetry while working my 9 to 5. And um, you know, I never had to depend on medication. And 3 to 4 months into having to take Plaquenil, I was tired. I was angry.
mhm,
That, because I was realizing that, like, I will always have to take this in order for me to be able to get out of bed without joint pain. Like, I remember rebelling against that. Like, my grief kind of showed up in a way of like rebellion. So for me, it was like, I would like just intentionally not take my medication just because I just wanted to like not do it. Like, I didn't want to take my meds. And so I wouldn't. But what would happen is I would be
oof,
bedridden the next day because because my joints are reminding me that no, like, there's still a lot of inflammation in your body, and this medication is lowering it so that you can be able-bodied. And so there was this war going on inside myself where I was just like really mad that I had to do this.
mhm,
And um and it's not something that I was able to even explain or share with my family, because none of them understand what that is or what that meant. And also, like, I don't have any family in the city, so everything was always just phone call check-ins, and that's, you can only say so much by phone. And
mhm.
so, yeah, my grief came like that, but it was also just sadness and pity, really, because you just start feeling sorry for yourself, because it's sad. It sucks. um, and I think for me, what got me through my grief was a lot of just like, I mean, prayer, because for me, I believe in God.
Yeah.
And that to me just anchored me a little bit more to something that was outside of myself. And so that helped me um, remember that I am more than this body, and that I have access to a power that is outside of myself to empower me. And so that to me has been like very foundational in in the hard days, to remember that the God that created me is still present in my pain.
Yeah.
And so and I know that not everybody believes that, but for me that's been like a crucial part of my anchoring, especially when I would be frustrated. And not to say that, like, you know, my faith has always been high and everything's been great. No, I've been mad at God. I've been mad at life. I've been, you know, but I think there's this, it's almost like there's a level um of surrender that I managed to do. And when I say surrender, I mean like I've had to just kind of surrender the process, surrender this idea that, you know, every plan that I had for myself might not happen. And so I had to just, whatever expectation I had about what my life was going to be, I needed to just let it be what it is. And that was really hard. And I think the grief that a lot of us who have chronic illness have is the fighting. You're fighting for this life that you know that you want versus the reality of what is. And it's like this constant tug of war where sometimes whatever the sickness is kind of takes over your reality in a way that you don't like it. And sometimes it's indefinite. Sometimes you don't even know when you'll get back to some semblance of like what you want out of your life, you know. And for me, like through my faith, it's like I learned to just let go, um even when I didn't know what that future was going to look like. I needed to not try to predict what my tomorrow was going to be, and to just trust that, you know, that the God that sustained me today will figure it out tomorrow, because I did not have the capacity to think about that. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's like this weird, like, it's so weird, like, okay, I'm not a giving up, because it could come across as giving up.
Yeah.
But a more of just like, right now, you know, my sickness is landing me just in bed, and I only have the strength to do this. And even if I want to do X, Y, and Z right now, my body's not letting me. Therefore, I have to trust that I will get to X, Y, and Z at the time that I will have the strength to do that. You know what I mean? And then just, and I can't say that it happened like year one or
Oh
year
no,
two.
no, no, no.
My
It's a process.
Yeah, exactly.
Because with grief, it is a healing, you know, process. Like
Exactly.
you've heard of the 5 stages of grief.
Yes.
Yeah, and you know, and obviously with faith being a major part of your life, you know, like the bargaining stage was major.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah. It,
yes.
it sounded like a lot of prayers, like, you know, God, if you get me out of this, I will do X, Y, Z, you
Yeah.
know, like help me out here. And
Yeah.
so, yeah.
Yeah. So meanwhile, some people just get stuck at denial or just straight up anger.
Yep. Yeah.
Because I think the 5 stages is what? Uh there's denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance.
Yeah. I think
Sometimes
you're,
some people
yeah.
don't go through those 5 stages in that order.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also like, yeah, because grief is not linear. Grief is not like step
Oh,
one,
no.
ta ta ta.
Oh,
Like step
God.
two, it's, you go, you get angry, and
Uh-huh.
then everything's fine. You live your life, you don't even think about it, and then all of a sudden you're sad,
Boom.
and
Yeah.
then you're angry again, and then you're in denial, and then you're
Yep.
angry again.
Yep. Been
Yeah.
there. Yeah, I've been there. Like all of a sudden, that it happened actually with just yeah, I've had it actually like just 4 years ago. It was um okay. Yeah, no, I'm not gonna wait. I can't do this on my own own show. I don't want people to hear me go into tears on my own podcast. Yeah,
It's
no,
all right.
it was when when my father had passed away. Like it was
Mm,
oh man, it was like at first it was just like that. I yeah, it was obviously like traumatizing. Like just
yeah.
like sad. Then um then I was just talking to the minorologist about things that are going on.
Hmm.
Then I sobbed like a baby.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Then yeah, it was just ugh.
Yeah. No, it's hard, and it's I think any loss
Oh,
is really not only difficult for the person experiencing it, but oftentimes the people that are around that
yeah.
knows that like you're navigating grief,
Hmm.
like oftentimes they don't really know how to support
Hmm.
you, and then sometimes you don't even know how to support you when you're
Yeah,
navigating that,
yeah.
because all of these are like new emotions, and it doesn't matter how long you've experienced
Hmm.
the loss, the
Yeah.
grief oftentimes is ongoing, because even when as I'm talking about the grieving process of navigating chronic illness, I'm like 12 years into my lupus diagnosis, and I can say that like there are times where that grief happens, and it happens in different ways depending on like the stage of life that you're in, or like you have a goal, and then you get frustrated by the fact that like you can't reach it soon enough because of where you're at health wise.
But the way that we can live our truth in it is just how do we how do you think that you've lived through your truth
Mhm.
through it, like now, how did you define yourself through that obstacle, right?
Mm. Yeah, that's a good question. um there are a few things that I over the years that I managed to do to kind of help me through. um I think one was just like, you know radical honesty.
Mm,
Because you have to come with the terms that of your reality. You because part of the grieving process is denial, and when you've accepted that like this is where you're at, I think that's huge. And it's really fundamental to how you end up handling like a health setback, because you have to fully be able to look at it in the face and
mhm,
recognize that, like, you know, I used to do this and now I can't.
mhm,
And this is how my body works now. And that's a hard reality to sit with, but it also and becomes like the beginning of a way through, because
mhm.
that's the other part, is that it's not, I had to come to terms that like this isn't something I can escape. This is something that I have to navigate through. And also throughout my journey, I also had to learn that to lean on other people. And that was really hard because I'm, I'm an independent Black woman, that tries not to depend on other people and all of that. But, we can't live alone. We need community. We need people around us. And, I think for me, throughout the years of me navigating lupus and other subsequent chronic illnesses that kind of came from lupus in a way, I realized, especially during the times where I would get to a really dark place mentally because of all of the, the mental health aspect of going through, like heavy flares where you can't really function very much. I had to let others around me know that, sometimes when I'm going through this, I withdraw. So I need them to message me. I need them to help me get out of that dark space, because I won't be able to get myself out,
Oh, wow.
and it took a long time for me to even find the words to recognize that, like, yeah, I can't get out of this without someone. I need, when I don't have any strength to, for example, do groceries or things like that, to not let my pride prevent me from getting support.
Oh,
you
okay.
know because sickness will humble you quick. you know doesn't matter how strong and powerful you think you are, when you're navigating a really hard health setback, you're all the way down.
Yeah.
And you have to lean on people, and it's
Yeah.
very difficult, especially maybe
Oh,
you're in a season in your life where your trust is already limited, and so you don't have a lot of people around you. It's really, really hard. And so it took a lot of having to lean on people, even if I wasn't sure if they would even say yes, because, especially in moments where you've never asked people for that degree of help, but then you realize that you need to, because because that is how you can recover, because you need pillars, you need people to be your strength when you don't have any, you know?
mm,
And so that was a huge way for me to kind of navigate through my recovery, because it really does take a village. I have not arrived where I'm at alone at all. It took not only my community, the people around me, but also um, a good care team. If I'm
it,
to.
that's the thing, for just for our pride, it can be so tough just to ask for help, because for some of us, it just can be so so hurtful just for our ego, because we're thinking, okay, I'm just gonna toughen this out. I'm gonna toughen this out. It's just, I need to build up this resilience, see, and I can do this by myself. I'll do this by myself, and then it's, oh no,
Yeah, yeah,
that's a major obstacle. Just even asking for help, just saying,
yeah,
I need help.
yeah, yeah. And oftentimes you don't even know what kind of help you need, but you do. And that's hard. And that's really hard, because sometimes I remember, especially early on when I had my diagnosis, like,
Yeah.
there would be people that say, let me know what I can help with. And I wouldn't know what to say. I know I needed help, but I didn't really know what it looked like yet. And so it was a lot of, like, just working through it alone a lot, actually, before figuring out that, like, oh, I guess it would have been helpful if I could talk to someone, or just, like, yeah, like, just different things like that. Like, it took a very long time for me to figure that out.
In all of that, the time though, that we've that you've overcome that. Like you've had all the faith, your spirituality has kept you strong, and I I just can't let this slide by, because you've actually been, like, just to show how much your talents and your your abilities have been recognized. Like, there's some stuff I found out about you. I mean, come on. Performer at the Edmonton Poetry Festival, at the 2012 Canadian Festival of Spoken Word. You opened for the 27th Governor General, the Right Honorable Michael Jean. So, Medgine, when were you gonna tell me?
It's kind of wild, all those things, to be honest. Every time I think about like just my own journey with poetry, and the doors that it's open and the opportunities it's given me access to, it's always like mind-blowing.
Yeah,
because you know, I never really thought about writing for other people, if that makes sense. Like writing has always been a way for me to process and what I'm, and for me to say out loud, it kind of helped me, kind of solidified my journey. And in
mhm,
doing so, I was realizing that like it was impacting other people.
yeah,
And it's been a wild ride so far.
yeah,
And it was yeah, definitely one of the major highlights for me was meeting the Right Honorable Michael Jean.
yeah,
I think it was about a year or so after she finished her term as Governor General. And we had just a great conversation, especially given that she is also Haitian. And I wrote a poem about Nelson Mandela, and the lecture that she was about to speak on at the U of A was it was around the impact of um, the Haitian Revolution, and its reflection around the legacy of Nelson Mandela. And that was, I believe it was like a year after his passing was when she presented that. And so it was just really, really impactful. And
yeah,
she had really great, just great words of encouragement for me to
yeah.
continue writing. And so, yeah.
And that's represent the resilience of you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And also I'm gonna ask you a little some secrets of, like, the writing, like composing process as a poet laureate. You know, like when doing spoken word, when going into your when composing,
Mhm.
like, do you sometimes look at what you write and you're thinking, you know what would go really good here? Okay, alliteration. Ooh, no. A synecdoche.
Mhm.
Ooh, no. How about this? Mm, A metaphor, or
Mhm.
your use of literary techniques.
Yeah. That's a good question. You know, what's funny is that like a lot of people, now that I'm doing, because I'm doing a lot of poetry and all of that, people assume that like my major was English, when, you know, English is my third language. I
Oh,
went to school for
yeah.
biological sciences. And so for me, but I always loved wordplay. And so for
Yeah.
me, it poetry was just playing with words. And
Mhm.
so I never necessarily had like, oh, I should add you know, a metaphor, simile, I think a lot in images. And so for me, sometimes I have an image that I want to like write about, like if that makes sense. And so that's how I end up writing. I'm
Yeah.
just writing from the best way that I can describe what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
And yeah, and that's how I end up writing more so than like, but then, you know, in the editing process, maybe that's when I kind of think about like just those mechanics. But when it comes to like the starting process of writing, it's oftentimes it's either like an image that I have or thought, or sometimes it's just a line that I heard from someone saying a quote that kind of sits with me, and I don't, or maybe it rubs me the wrong way or a good way, but it's kind of living rent free in my mind.
Yeah.
Those tend to become poems eventually.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's kind of a little bit of my technique, I guess. One of the things that I do a lot beyond like poetry and everything is just journaling.
Yeah.
And if there are people that are listening that are wanting to get into just writing and poetry, I strongly encourage journaling, and journaling in a way that's, to me, it's not a dear diary. Today I did this, like at all. For me, like journaling is literally just like whatever's on your in your head that day is what you write. I'm not thinking about it being like coherent sentences. Sometimes it's just letters to myself. Sometimes it's reminders of like things that I want to remember, whether it be like just words that I feel like I need to hear right now.
Yeah.
Or words that I heard someone say that I want to remember, or I want to kind of sit with, or process why it's something rubs me the wrong way. Like journaling has been my way of processing, because a lot of people sometimes when they try to come up with like a decision, they want to be able to talk it out. I'm not like that. I sometimes I don't know how I feel about a situation until I journal, and then I was like, oh yeah, this is how I feel.
Yeah.
So I'm an internal processor, not a external
Yeah.
processor.
The way that that language gets played with and expressed by poetry, it just always fascinates me. With just how techniques are coming out,
Mhm.
how like even up to the way that sometimes gestures are used to go with the flow,
Yeah, for
and
spoken
it's almost
word.
like it's a adding to the cadence that just to give that special that delivery or pace that to give it
Mhm.
an even cadence. Like I was watching Amanda Gorman when she was uh, giving her poem "The Hill We
Mhm.
Climb" in
Right.
2021. I was noticing that she was moving her hands in that certain way, and she was also at the same time having this certain pace and cadence in her speech. And it's almost
Mhm.
like her hands were adding up to that.
Mhm. Yeah, I also talk with my hands, so that's probably why I love spoken word poetry.
Yeah.
And I'm able to use yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, I love using just body language to kind of amplify what the message is. And I think that's like the one of the most beautiful things about spoken word poetry in particular is that because it's a different mood when you hear poetry be read or like be heard versus just reading a poem. And both are beautiful, but I prefer spoken word poetry for that reason, that it just there's a way of like bringing it all to life.
Yeah, absolutely. But Jean, there are three critical questions that I must ask you.
Okay.
So first off, what does living your truth mean to you?
Living your truth means being radically honest in how you feel and making space for that expression, and giving yourself permission to sit in those feelings. I think that's like huge.
How does living your truth and being authentic make you a better person?
It gives others permission to do the same. I think in the world where we are still very much in group thinking and what other people think, especially when it comes to social media, I think when you look at someone and you could tell that they're not trying to follow anybody else but themselves, it inspires people to look within themselves and to identify what areas are they hiding from the world because of the fear of being looked at as different. And it kind of gives them the permission to draw that out. It gives other people the courage to draw whatever that part is out and to stand in it, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And finally, what advice would you give to someone looking to embrace who they are?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, I would say not to worry about other people's reactions to who they are, because the right people will recognize the value you bring. And so trust those who respond well to who you are, because those are your people. Um, and that's it.
Listeners, you can follow Medgine on Twitter at Medgine Speaks, as well as Instagram at Medgine Speaks. Any other links that I can think of?
Yeah, I wanted to also let you know, yeah, that I am in the process of launching my own podcast, and it's called the Flare Up Podcast. And it's about
Mhm.
essentially, it's a podcast on the multi-dimensional layers of navigating chronic illness, and chronic disappointments due to health setbacks. And it's a space where I want to be able to talk about just demystifying what it means to recover and to rebuild wellness in our own terms. And so, the podcast is a little bit of mixture of who I am. So there's going to be conversations around faith. There's also going to be conversations with different care providers and different people who have gone through their own journey of chronic illness or health setbacks. And we're going to talk about lessons. We're going to talk about those nuances, and there will also be artist spotlight, because I want to just have those conversations with artists who have had those experiences and kind of go behind the curtain, kind of so to speak, when it comes to some of their artwork that deals with healing, and to actually tell the story behind these different art pieces, whether it be spoken word or song or whatever. And so yeah, Flare Up Podcast. Right now it's still in the building stages, but by later on it's going to be out. And subscribe and follow us on it's going to be on Instagram as well, so Flare Up Podcast.
You heard it right here on this episode. Make sure to follow her on social media wherever it's available. Medgine, thank you so much for being here. And to all you listeners and viewers, thank you so much. And remember to stay true.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
Bye, everyone.